She sailed with purpose, but returned in silence. The Carroll A. Deering was meant to complete a routine voyage, yet what drifted back was a ghost ship, eerily intact, but utterly deserted. No crew. No logbook. No answers. Just questions carried on the wind, and a mystery that still haunts the Atlantic to this day. Welcome to my YouTube channel chapter, The Lost. Here, we uncover stories abandoned by time, haunting tales, unsolved mysteries, and journeys that ended without answers. The setting sail, a voyage begins. In the crisp light of a July morning in 1920, the Carroll A. Deering rocked gently at anchor in the harbor of Norfolk, Virginia. With her 5 towering masts and steel-framed hull, she looked every bit the modern marvel of maritime engineering, a schooner built not for grandeur but for purpose. Her mission was straightforward: deliver a shipment of coal to Rio de Janeiro. But beneath the salt-kissed boards and brass fittings, the voyage was already taking on the weight of unease. Captain William H. Merritt, a seasoned sailor in his late 60s, had been tapped to lead the voyage. Stern but respected, Merritt's reputation spanned decades of navigating unpredictable waters. Yet just before departure, illness struck. He was forced to disembark, returning home with his son, who had served as first mate. Their absence left a void, and into that void stepped a man who hadn't commanded a ship in years. Captain Willis B. Wormel was 66, retired, and soft-spoken. He had lived inland for some time and was known more for his quiet spirituality than sea tales. Still, the owners of the Deering trusted his judgment and experience. They believed his calm demeanor would steady any crew. But Wormel was now responsible for a team of sailors he had not chosen, strangers whose loyalties and temperaments he had no time to assess. Among them, First Mate Charles B. McClellan stood out, not for leadership, but for tension. Young, outspoken, and irritable, McClellan clashed with Wormel almost immediately. He resented the captain's gentle ways and openly questioned his authority. In Barbados, the ship paused briefly for repairs and supplies, and McClellan's temper boiled over. In a drunken outburst at a local tavern, he declared the captain incompetent and unfit to command. Locals overheard. Authorities were notified. Wormel, alarmed, filed an official complaint against his first mate. But the crew stayed intact. The ship pushed on toward Cape Hatteras, cutting through darkening waters under a veil of rising discord. Witnesses on nearby ships reported seeing the Carroll A. Deering again on January 28, 1921, sailing oddly close to Diamond Shoals, a notoriously dangerous stretch of shifting sandbars off North Carolina. A man, tall, unfamiliar, and not the captain, stood at the helm, shouting indistinctly to a passing vessel. His movements were erratic. The message, whatever it was, would never be decoded. Then, silence. The sea swallowed their voices, and the ship sailed on. Unaware of the strange sighting, the world waited for the Deering's return. It never came. What began as a routine voyage had drifted into something far darker. A seasoned captain replaced by a reluctant one. A crew restless and unvetted. A conflict quietly escalating on open water. And now, a schooner gone silent just miles from home. The Carroll A. Deering had vanished, not in a storm, not in battle, but into mystery. And mysteries, like the ocean, do not give up their secrets easily. The ghost ship, discovery and dread. On the morning of January 31, 1921, the lightship stationed at Cape Lookout, North Carolina, reported an unusual sight. The Carroll A. Deering, sails full but movement sluggish, was drifting dangerously close to Diamond Shoals, a maritime graveyard where countless ships had met their end. The lightship keeper noted something strange. A tall man with a foreign accent shouted across the water, claiming they had lost their anchors. Oddly, he avoided using the customary maritime protocol. More troubling still, the man was clearly not Captain Wormel. The Deering drifted past without further communication. Later that day, another ship saw the schooner again, sails still set, no distress signal raised. Then, the Carroll A. Deering simply vanished into the gray Atlantic horizon. 2 days later, a Coast Guard cutter braved the turbulent waters around Diamond Shoals and reached the Deering, now grounded at a severe angle on the shifting sandbars. What they found aboard would ignite one of the most enduring maritime mysteries in American history. The ship was entirely deserted. Lifeboats were missing. The galley appeared freshly used, pot still on the stove, bread loaves half-sliced on the table. Below deck, beds were unmade, clothing lay strewn about as though the crew had vanished mid-task. Strangest of all, the ship's navigation tools, logbooks, and the captain's personal effects were gone. It was as if someone had methodically erased the identities and intentions of those aboard. But nothing had been stolen. The cargo, coal, was still in place. There were no signs of struggle. No blood. No footprints in the sand surrounding the wreck. The ship had not been looted, it had been abandoned. Deliberately, quietly, and completely. Captain Wormel's cabin was particularly unsettling. His old Bible rested neatly on the desk, open to a passage from Psalms. His eyeglasses lay beside it. These small, intimate artifacts suggested he hadn't expected to leave, at least, not so soon. Was he taken? Did he go willingly? The silence screamed for answers. The Coast Guard tried to tow the vessel free, but shifting shoals made the task impossible. Meanwhile, word of the ghost ship spread. Newspapers seized on the mystery, printing bold headlines filled with speculation. Along the coast, whispers began, of mutiny, of pirates, of something darker. Families of the missing crew were left with only the haunting image of a ship frozen in time, its last moments a question without answer. The Carroll A. Deering sat there for weeks, battered by wind and wave, slowly breaking apart. But it wasn't just a shipwreck. It was a story no one could finish. And as the ocean closed around her splintered hull, the deeper mystery remained. Not just what had happened aboard the Deering, but why no one had ever come back to tell it. Theories and investigations, searching for the truth. In the weeks that followed the discovery of the Carroll A. Deering, the U.S. government launched a full-scale investigation. The schooner's ghostly condition demanded answers, and with no distress signal, no survivors, and no clear cause, every theory was weighed with equal urgency and equal suspicion. At the center of the inquiry stood Captain Willis B. Wormel, or rather, the mystery of his disappearance. The quiet, devout captain had never been known for harshness, but his sudden authority over an unfamiliar and restless crew had raised tensions even before they left port. And then there was First Mate Charles McClellan, whose open contempt for Wormel had been witnessed in Barbados. Was this a case of mutiny? Did McClellan rally the crew against their aging commander and seize control of the ship? Investigators found the idea plausible. Wormel's belongings had vanished, along with all identifying records. It was possible the crew had turned, cast the captain overboard, and attempted an escape, only to meet a fate even more sinister afterward. But without a body, or a shred of solid evidence, the theory could not be proved. Others suspected piracy. Though the golden age of buccaneers had long passed, the Atlantic was not without peril. In the wake of World War I, lawless bands, rum runners, smugglers, and opportunists prowled the waters. Perhaps the Deering had been boarded, its crew forced overboard, and the vessel abandoned in haste. Yet the ship's cargo of coal, though not precious, remained untouched. And again, there were no signs of struggle, no bullet holes, no broken locks, no blood. Then came a more chilling possibility: sabotage. At the time, the United States was gripped by fear of communist infiltration. The first Red Scare had made saboteurs and anarchists the villains of every shadow. Some theorized that foreign agents had taken the ship to disrupt American trade, targeting vessels like the Deering to strike fear into shipping lines. FBI files mentioned this theory, though no suspect was ever named, and no group claimed responsibility. Not all explanations were grounded in logic. The Deering's proximity to the infamous Bermuda Triangle, an area already associated with disappearances, fueled paranormal speculation. Reports of ghost ships, magnetic anomalies, and sea monsters poured in from armchair experts and newspaper sensationalists. But officials dismissed such claims as fantasy, distractions from the search for truth. Despite weeks of interviews, the analysis of drift patterns, and even testimony from lightship crew who had seen the Deering's final movements, investigators hit a wall. The sea, indifferent and immense, offered no evidence. No mutineer confessed. No pirates were found. No sabotage was confirmed. The Deering's crew had vanished more completely than any explanation could justify. And so, the question lingered, not just how the Carroll A. Deering had come to rest on Diamond Shoals, but why, in a world of maps and mechanisms, a ship could simply disappear. Legacy of the Deering echoes through time. By March of 1921, the Carroll A. Deering had become more than a shipwreck. It had become a symbol of maritime enigma, a riddle that no authority could answer and no family could forget. With the schooner still lodged at Diamond Shoals, battered and half-submerged, the Coast Guard made a grim decision. Declaring the vessel a hazard to passing ships, they stripped what remained of value and used dynamite to destroy what was left. The explosion marked the end of the Deering's physical form. But her story, like the tide, would not be so easily erased. For the families of the missing crew, the blast offered no closure. 10 men had vanished, each with dreams, habits, and histories. Captain Wormel's relatives clung to his journals and letters, rereading his final words for hints of fear or resignation. The mother of a young deckhand reportedly visited the North Carolina coast for years, hoping to recover a body, a keepsake, anything that might explain her son's final days. She found nothing but gull cries and salt air. Newspaper columns kept the mystery alive. Some blamed the government's lack of transparency. Others fed the public's appetite for intrigue with tales of ghostly sightings. Maritime experts dissected the ship's final hours, while folklorists folded the Deering into the growing mythology of the Atlantic, a sister tale to the Mary Celeste, another ship found adrift without a soul on board. The Carroll A. Deering inspired books, radio specials, and eventually documentaries. Her story became part of American coastal legend, a subject whispered by lighthouse keepers and studied by naval historians. Every theory rekindled old emotions, hope, grief, and wonder. And still, none could claim to hold the truth. Yet perhaps the enduring power of the Deering story lies not in what is missing, but in what it left behind, a haunting silence that speaks louder than any conclusion. In a world increasingly mapped, measured, and monitored, the total vanishing of a ship's crew reminds us how easily the sea can reclaim its secrets. No logbook, no final message, no grave, just a ship, eerily preserved, then deliberately destroyed. In the end, the Carroll A. Deering offers more than a maritime mystery. It reveals the limits of certainty. It invites us to look deeper into the currents of history, to question what lies beneath the surface of routine events. A simple cargo run became a legend, not because of what was found, but because of what was never explained. And perhaps that's the truest legacy of the Deering, not just a vanished crew, but a story without an ending. A story still adrift.